I'm doing kind of like a face camera thing because I wanted to announce to you guys that I am actually working on a novel for you guys and any other people who want to read a good book, or I don't know if it's going to be good, but and basically I wasn't going to announce it until I got at least a credible amount of work in, because I didn't want to be that guy who spent multiple years talking about this book he's going to write. Or this game he's going to make and only be like scratching the surface of it, because I don't want to be that guy who will talk forever and forever about a thing he'll never make. So I'm actually making it. I'm only going to give you guys a very little bit about it, but I'm thinking about doing a weekly thing. This has been like a thing I've been wanting to do ever since I was a 9-year-old kid, and it just clicked in my brain now that I'm 21 that I have to do this. Like, I'm not going to be happy unless I do this, because I can't just keep living my life being a fucking wage worker, working every day, show up to work, do your job, go home, eat, sleep, repeat. Like, I can't live like that anymore. I've been doing it for basically 2 years of my life, and I'm like, this is not how you be happy. That I need to create something. I need to at least know I let my characters become things instead of just letting them let the art die with me. So that's my announcement for the book. I hope you guys, when it does come out, buy it and help support me in creating more books and maybe even finishing an entire series.
The date is April 1st, 2020. The author, known only as Sperit, has been hinting on Twitter that his book is to soon be released. But on that day, on April 1st, he decides to launch it on Amazon ahead of schedule. I've known of Sperit for many years, dating back to the early 2010s when he posted and roleplayed on a website called Funny Junk. Despite posting a lot of vlogs about his novel, he never really rose to fame, especially outside of Funny Junk. This is unlike his contemporary, Merlogic, who was also a troll on the site at that time. He's the Wonder Bread guy. My series, The Absurds, focuses on those stories, events, and individuals that I think embody the saying, truth is stranger than fiction. For that reason, a lot of my episodes are about juxtaposing artists and their works, to show that the real lives and the true stories behind these pieces of fiction are actually just as, if not more, interesting than the fiction itself. That's what led me to cover Sonichu and its creator Chris Chan. I covered Cool Cat and his creator Derek Savage. I discussed the true story behind New York State declaring a house legally haunted, as well as the book that was written about the events. Although, to be fair to that one, the authors claim that that's a true story, but no, it's absolutely not, because it involves ghosts. So on April 3rd, 2020, I recorded myself opening a package from Amazon. So this is beautiful. This is enormous. It's the size of like a coloring book. I can't believe I'm actually holding this in my hand after like a bajillion years. Well, I cannot wait to crack this open and get right back to you. Like I said, that was April of 2020. That was during 2 weeks to slow the spread. I had no idea that my state would lock me inside for the next 2 years. I didn't know that I'd be furloughed from my job. I didn't know that I would make a 5-hour-long Sonichu deep dive video. I didn't know that Chris Chan was going to sleep with his mom. I didn't know that I was going to hit 60,000 subscribers on YouTube. I didn't know that I was going to move, get a promotion, and all these things. But of all those things that happened, the reason that it took so long to make this video is because it was really annoying. I finished this book in 3 days. And then I wrote the script, and then I recorded the script, and then I went to go edit it, and I realized that unlike when I was covering Sonichu, there was nothing interesting in the background of the video. It was just me describing scenes from the book. So my genius decision was that I was going to draw some images, some key scenes from the book, so that you would have something to look at while I was describing the book. 3 years and 531 drawings later, and here we are, January of 2023, my Sperits Hunting a Chicken review is finally out. So while I talk about Spirit's book, and while we delve into one of my favorite topics, which is the relationship between outsider art and the works that they create, I want you to enjoy my images, but overall I really want you to ignore them. I don't want your experience of this video of my review of his book to be colored by my drawing. So please don't let me distract you from the genius that is Sperits Hunting a Chicken. So here's my review of the novel. Despite its technical flaws and its desperate need for another draft, or 2, or 3, Sperits Hunting a Chicken is an expertly paced fantasy novel that impressed me from start to finish. The author has a very good grasp on character arcs, story pacing, and has put a lot of effort into building his world. The world never distracts from the story, and the strangeness of the world keeps the reader guessing about what is behind every corner. If you want to read the uncensored words of a mad lad, then I highly recommend this book. So that's my review, and we're gonna toss that aside. No one cares about reviews. We're going to now analyze the book. So I'm going to have to go into a lot of detail, like this much detail, like the remaining length of the video amount of detail. And as I go, I'm going to make some comments about what's happening in the story, but I'm really going to save a lot of my analysis for the ending. And also I'm going to give some writing and editing tips. So if you have any interest in reading this book after my previous coverage of Sperit, or now that I've introduced you to it and you know that it's out and ready to buy, if you want to read it, I would say stop the video now and read it. I know that very often I will watch reviews of movies I haven't seen or books I haven't read from a YouTube channel just because I like the reviewer. So if you're doing that, that's fine. And if you do like the book after we're done discussing it here, then you should probably drop on by Sperit's Twitter page and just say hi. Or you can check him out on YouTube. Alright, let's get into it. The book starts out with the point of view character waking up in darkness. It's like super dark. It's so dark that it uses the word dark 6 times to describe how dark it is. She may have been seeing with the eyes of a dead woman, but her other seances showed her a world booming with light to be explored. So this is a typo. In fact, every time the book wants to use the word senses, it uses the word seances. I'm going to give Sperit this typo for free. It's not going to matter in the end, because there's going to be just so many more. But starting with the next typo, we're going to have an ongoing typo counter, but he gets this one for free, so we're currently at 0. This woman looking around in the dark is Sporp Wukong. She has just awoke in the realm of darkness and has no idea how she got there. There's a light at the horizon, and she can smell foliage around her, but other than that, she may as well be in a void. Sporp starts having flashes of memories as she sits in the void, but realizes that she can remember her childhood years more clearly, as if this strange world is making her forget her adulthood. She assures herself that she is 21 years old. She remembers her most recent birthday, but she can't think of any other clear memories. She knows that she moved in with a family in China, and that she trained to become a monk. But whenever she tried to focus on a memory beyond the superficial, all she saw was a coin flipping in front of her, and she felt as if she was spinning around with it. To clear her mind, she gets up and starts walking, and she walks right into a tree. Still blind, she walks through the darkness some more, dwelling on the fact that she knows that she can't go home, but she can't remember why. She comes across what she thinks might be a lamppost, so she shimmies up the side and finds a damp torch at the top. Well, shimmy is the word that I use. The word that the book uses is titty fuck. The book is pretty crass. It throws F-bombs everywhere. It takes time to describe how flat Sporp's chest is and how thick her hips are. This trend is going to continue. This book and this video are very much not rated PG. By rubbing 2 sticks together, Sporp's able to light the torch that she's found, and she finds that she's in the middle of an abandoned town. She wanders through the town and grabs a leather backpack and fills it with the supplies that she finds, like stale bread, vaguely described weapons, and a lot of suspicious gemstones that to her look like sapphires. She starts to walk again, towards what she hopes is the next town, and can now see that the trees around her are taller than the hills, and their leaves are blue. The grass is also blue, and she accepts for the first time that she is on an alien world. Then, Sporp comes across a monster in the darkness. It's a giant fox beast with 2 tails that is frightened by her fire, but it is allied with the darkness. Sporp, who is trained in kung fu and ki harnessing and all of that nonsense, is a master of the blood bullet ability, which is when you cut the tip of your finger and shoot blood out of it so fast that it can penetrate skin like a bullet. This is apparently a very dangerous technique to use. Sporp has to slow her heartbeat, and then channel it all at once to shoot out the blood. But the beast lets out a mighty roar in the darkness, and it causes her to lose focus, so she gets drowsy from the blood loss. Thus far, the book has been pretty well focused. A human character wakes up in a foreign world. It is an isekai. It's Alice in Wonderland, or The Chronicles of Narnia, or Spirited Away, or the Playmobil movie. The problem with Sporp being a monk who can channel her ki to shoot blood bullets is that the world that she came from, the Earth that Sporp started out on before coming to this alien world, obviously is not our world. On her world, ki channeling exists. On our world, it does not. Usually, with an isekai, we explore the alien magical world through the eyes of a protagonist who comes from our world. Even in non-isekai stories, this is a thing, like in Harry Potter. He goes to the wizarding world, but he starts off in the everyday normal world that we live in. We know just as much about the world as he does, because he comes from the same world as us, and then we learn about the magical world together. But that's not the same with Sporp, because Sporp knows about ki. We don't know about ki. We don't know what its limits are or how it works. So now we're in a strange world with a strange character who we can't really get in the head of. This isn't unheard of in fiction. This is how things like Avatar: The Last Airbender or A Game of Thrones / A Song of Ice and Fire works. So I'm not saying that it's bad to have a character like this, it just makes us harder to follow what's happening. Still fighting the fox, Sporp positions 2 spears behind her so that the beast can't leap at her back, and she holds up 2 swords to defend her front. After some waiting, the beast leaps toward her. She tumbles backward and slices its chest with her sword, suffering only a minor cut on her arm from its talon. Talon? Claw? Nail? Whatever. She lands on her back, which is impossible because she should be propped up by the spears. In the next paragraph, she picks the spears up off the ground, meaning that at some point they fell, but we were not told this. She throws the spear at the fox, which is retreating, and she impales its Achilles tendon. She grabs the spear and tugs on it to pull the beast toward her. It's whimpering and is unable to walk, and Sporp slits its throat with her sword. As she watches it bleed out, with pity, the beast suddenly collapses in on itself like a dying star. It forms into a pile of the small blue crystals, just like the sapphires that she took from the village. She realizes that they are the remains of the dead of this world. Then, a voice calls out to her in the darkness. Am I not a monster? Yes. Am I friendly? Yes. The speaker steps out of the darkness, but Chapter 1 ends before we find out what it is. Chapter 2 describes the creature as being 4'2", with stubby little arms and legs and no hands or feet. It is pure white, with no necks and big bug eyes. It is a Sperit. It's carrying a bag with it, and it purrs like a cat. Sporp figures that the village she was at previously must have been a Spirit village, although this is a dumb thing to assume because the doorways and the houses of that village would have been built for 4-foot-tall people, which she would have noted while she was walking through it. The book does not intend to make Sporp an unintelligent character, but as it goes on, it will show off her extreme gullibility and lack of deduction skills, and that all starts right here. The Spirit in front of Sporp wears a bell with no ringer around its neck like a cow. Sporp then pets the Spirit, and it is squishy. The Spirit then walks over to the pile of crystals left behind by the beast and picks them up. He tells Sporp that the crystals are money, and then he begins to scoop them faster, realizing that he just told her that they were money and that he was now stealing it. Sporp calls him a thief and holds him at spear point. The Spirit then brandishes a knife, which Sporp knocks aside, rolling her eyes. The Spirit says that she can have food and take a bath at his home if she comes along with him. Sporp sizes him up and thinks that he can't be a big threat, so she follows him home. This is when we learn that this is not a third-person limited book, it is a third-person omniscient book. That means that we can get into the heads of multiple characters at the same time. Not only that, but the book is very liberal with when it jumps between perspectives. In one paragraph, we might be in one character's head, and in the next, we're in a different character's head. And then we're a disembodied narrator, and then we're in the head of the book's villain, who has psychic powers, then we're back into the head of the first character we were in. But the book never really tells you whose head we're in, you just kind of have to know from context clues. It's very hard to keep track of. To be fair, there's nothing wrong with writing a book like this, there's nothing wrong with omniscient third-person perspectives, it's not a bad thing. It just makes the process of reading and getting into the book more difficult if it's not written by a very skilled author. As Sporp and the Sperit walk, the Sperit thinks to himself that he'll drug Sporp once they're in his home. He'll steal all of her stuff and sell her as a sex slave to demons. The juxtaposition of Sperits being cute, squishy little boys and this guy's dastardly little plot is very humorous. I like this as a bit of characterization and tension, as well as a joke. But as we go onward, we'll start to see how this motivation for the character becomes a problem. So as they're walking, they eventually come to a hill, and over the hill they can see light. The trees and the grass on this planet are indeed blue. The sky is yellow and the stars are orange. It's odd that the book waited until they came into the light to describe the stars, as opposed to the stars being visible in the darkness. There's a reason for this that gets explained later, but Sporp doesn't question it. She doesn't know what this reason is, so she should ask why you can't see the stars in the dark, but you can in the light. But she doesn't, and that makes her seem unintelligent. Sporp sees a tower off in the distance. It has a bright light burning at the top of it. It's like the tower, the Eye of Sauron, but it's the sun. And Sporp realizes that that is the sun of this world. So they arrive at Golden Harvest, which is Spirit's village. There are lots of other Spirits walking around, and Sporp notes how they're all diligent workers. Walking through town, Sporp thinks that when she first arrived in China as a child, she felt like an outsider, and she feels that way now, too. The town is described as being like a medieval town, but there are no other details given. They arrive at the Spirit's house, and it is desolate. His door falls in when he opens it, and you can almost hear the womp womp sound effect as it hits the ground. It's clear that he is very poor. His bath is just a bucket, and he fills it up for her, and he looks away from Sporp when she disrobes, even though all of the Spirits are naked, and so it's unclear why the concept of clothes even matters to him, but whatever. The Spirit's inner monologue as he sneaks a peek at Sporp is, and I quote, beautiful fit body, small perky breasts, full childbearing hips, and such luscious dick-sucking lips. He wants to sell her into slavery to demons as a sex slave. This Spirit is a traveler, and it makes sense that he understands the concept of clothes and sex, but it's weird that he is so fetishy about it when he is an asexual creature. I would imagine that instead he should probably think of her features very matter-of-factly, like a robot who doesn't understand why people are attracted to her but knows that they are. He should not use the word luscious or beautiful when describing her. While bathing, Sporp sees a cow out the window, and is understandably confused that an Earth cow is on this alien world. The Spirit explains that long ago, a Spirit named Squishy paid a wizard to conjure cows from Earth. Sporp then jumps up and says that she should go and see the wizard so she can go home. Spirit, who does not want her to leave, demands that she eat lunch with him, but Sporp says that she doesn't need him. The Spirit then tells her that he's the only Spirit who speaks her language. Now, technically, Sporp should have no reason to really believe this. She has met one Spirit, and he speaks English. The amount of Spirits she knows that speaks English is 100%. Granted, he does have a strange manner of speaking. All of his dialogue is a question followed by an answer, like, am I hungry? Yes. Am I friendly? Yes. But what makes this even more ridiculous is that Sporp will, in very short order, meet many more Spirits who speak English, and at no point does she think back to this conversation and wonder why her new friend is lying to her. So the Spirit and Sporp sit down to eat meat. Now, if you've been paying attention thus far, you might realize why eating meat should not be possible. It's been established that killing an animal turns it into the crystals, so meat should not exist as a concept on this planet. If there's a difference between the kind of animals that turn into crystals and the kind of animals that turn into meat, it is never explained in the book. The Spirit then secretly sprinkles dizzy powder on Sporp's food, and after eating it, she feels like passing out. It's not enough to actually put her to sleep, but she says that she feels drunk. She asks the Spirit if he has a name besides Spirit, and he says that he has never had a name because he's not worthy. She decides to name him Ding Ding because of the bell around his neck, and he gets very excited and runs through the town, proclaiming that he has been given a name. He stops beside Claymore the Cootie Slayer, who's a much larger Spirit, and he excitedly says that he's been given a name. Claymore and Ding Ding used to be friends, but Claymore became a respectable knight-type character, and Ding Ding made a living roaming the dark part of the planet looking for treasures from dead civilizations and harvesting their crystals. So Claymore is pissed that Ding Ding dare accept a name from Sporp, so he slaps him across the face. Claymore starts beating up Ding Ding, and he mentions that the two were the only survivors of some other settlement that never gets named. He says that Ding Ding needs to move on. Sporp interferes and saves Ding Ding. Claymore speaks to her with a British accent and tells her to back off, but Sporp is taller, and she pokes him in the chest, and then he slashes at her with a sword, cutting her robe and exposing her nipples, cause of course. This is supposed to humiliate her. Why the concept of female nudity would be embarrassing in a culture while everyone is a spirit is anybody's guess. Claymore also calls her Sporp, even though no one has said her name around him and he would have no way of knowing her name. Claymore reveals a magic sword he owned that always points at his foe's heart. As he brags about it, Sporp ties her red sash around her chest, as shown on the book's cover. Sporp realizes that she can't get close to Claymore unarmed as he has his long sword. Her first thought is to throw rocks at him, which she does. But once she runs out of rocks, she has to run around to find more, and it's this running around that actually wins her the fight. Claymore keeps getting tugged this way and that as the sword he's holding points directly at her heart no matter where she runs. This makes him dizzy, and he eventually has to turn off the magic of the sword to stay conscious, allowing Sporp to run in and deal a blow. This would have been much better if Sporp had worked out how to beat the magical blade for herself, like if we'd gotten an internal monologue where she figures out that running in a circle will make him dizzy. Instead, she just kind of picks up some rocks and then he's dizzy, and we get vague details as to how many rocks she has. So Sporp gets close enough to hit Claymore, but he swipes his sword up and impales her through the chest. We get a really sad paragraph from Ding Ding's perspective as he mourns for Sporp, the only person who ever treated him nicely. But then, Claymore removes the sword and there's no blood on it. Sporp reveals that she had stuffed her makeshift bra with rocks to act as protection in case his sword stabbed at her, because remember, it always aims exactly at the heart. So the sword just hit the rocks. Then, out of nowhere, a giant crab claw slams Claymore off his feet, and he goes flying into a house and gets stuck under rubble. Sporp looks around in confusion, and sees a crab claw growing out of Ding Ding's arm. Ding Ding is just as shocked as her, and didn't know that he could do that. Claymore, who is fine, gets up and is awestruck that Ding Ding is a, quote, soul guardian. Sporp asks what that means, and Claymore starts explaining something about the stars, and then Sporp just pelts him in the face with another rock. She yells, "Psych!" spelled P-Y-S-C-H, and she says that she doesn't care and that she was only distracting him. Alright, so that is typo count number 1. Let's get it on screen. So Sporp is on the rooftops throwing rocks at Claymore, who gets frustrated, and he casts a magic spell. He raises his sword high and yells, "Enchantment overclock." The sword is powered by his life energy, and this superpowers it, allowing him to fly towards a target like a heat-seeking missile. Sporp runs through town, and Claymore blasts through various houses as he flies after her. She's very fast, so she arrives in the farmland at the edge of town before him. The book says that she waits until the sword is within an inch of her heart to turn around and jump over the incoming sword spurt missile. Obviously, if she waited for it to be an inch away from her and then turned around, she would have gotten actually closer to the blade because her side would be closer than her front. And then if she took the time to jump, it would probably have hit her if it was going at heat-seeking missile speed, but whatever. Speaking of things that are physically impossible, the sword has to spin on a dime to find her heart again, and Claymore is forced to let go lest the blade cut off his arm. So because he drops the sword, it loses its magic power. The book had previously stated that spirits do not have hands or feet, and thus he cannot possibly have a palm of his hand, and it says that the sword fell out of the palm of his hand. This is a light technicality. It's understood what the author means. If an alien race doesn't have hands, it still makes sense to call the ends of their arms hands for all intents and purposes. Like, if I was writing it, I would probably replace the word hands with the word nub. The sword fell out of his nub. It's kind of whimsical and absurdist how spirits are able to hold on to anything to begin with, because when it's first described, Sporp thinks that it's odd that Ding Ding can just kind of carry stuff on the end of his arm like a Powerpuff Girl. So that's really more of a style thing. It's not technically wrong. So Claymore admits defeat because his sword is no longer in his nub and he's bleeding. Claymore picked up his sword and sheathed it back onto his back holster. The fight was over, and he was willing to take his defeat with honor. "What is your name?" Claymore asked, as he attempted to stand tall with pride, trying not to show weakness from the pain of his injury. That was on page 41. On page 35, Claymore had already called Sporp by her name. Claymore now wants to be courteous and grateful to Sporp, so that the townsfolk, who have gathered because of the fight, don't think of him as a sore loser. Sporp tells Claymore to tell the citizens that she is Princess Wukong, and that she challenged him, their town hero, for the right to see their leader so that she can inquire about a return trip home. This way, he'll save face, and she can get to go on with her journey. So they return to Ding Ding's home, and now Claymore deems Ding Ding worthy to be given a name by Sporp. So the two old friends make amends. Claymore asks Ding Ding what he knows of his crab claw power, and Ding Ding says that he has no idea. Claymore says that the answer may lie with the Fitsune. Fitsune are fox-like yokai who can have their tails transform into guardians, or something. Like, their tails can become a part of another animal if they need it to be, and it has something to do with stars? The book explains that 30 years ago, the Fitsune did something that really pissed off all of the Sperits. And the Sperits, including Ding Ding, now mistrust them, because they're cunning, and they see their species mostly as thieves. It goes into great detail about their bodies and what makes them good for thievery, and why the Sperits shun them. So Claymore helps Ding Ding off the ground, and as he does, Ding Ding picks something out of Claymore's pocket, and Sporp notices this, but doesn't say anything. The immediate juxtaposition between Ding Ding being a Spirit Soul Guardian, and Soul Guardian's powers being only held by the Fitsune, and Fitsune being described as thieves, and Ding Ding immediately stealing something, makes me think that there's a bigger connection here. This book does not delve into that connection. I'm guessing that is being saved for the sequel. So Claymore, Ding Ding, and Sporp are now all friends, and Claymore says he knows someone who might be able to pay them money to perform tasks so that they can afford enough for a wizard to send Sporp home. Sporp and Ding Ding agree to go along with him, and thus, Chapter 4 ends. So they make their way towards Lord Squishy's castle. The text describes it as rising high above other buildings in town and lying at the center. This means that when Sporp first arrived in town, she should have seen this large massive building at the town center, but it was never described to us, the reader. That kind of detail is very important to keep consistent. At the front of the manor are two guards, who tell them to halt and state their business. Usually the text will point out when a character is speaking English, and it will describe their accent and mannerisms, but because it doesn't do that this time, and because Ding Ding said that only he speaks English, I have to assume that these two guards are speaking the Spirit language. The point of bringing this up is that I shouldn't be taken out of the book trying to figure out if the point of view character can understand the dialogue. It should be made much more clear whose head we're currently in. Inside Squishy's manor, it's all fancy, with marble statues that the text says depict different races of spirits. And I, the reader, like Sporp, have no idea what the different races of spirits are, so the book goes into detail about each statue. There is a normal spirit, like the kinds outside. There are slightly thicker spirits. There are spirits with hair that looks straight out of the 40s, with vests and beehive hairdos. That's the book's description, not mine. And then there's a mysterious fourth spirit, whose statue was destroyed, with only the feet remaining. Each statue has an engraving, labeling what kind of spirit they are, and this destroyed statue, underneath, has labeled, in Yangshao, which is like ancient Chinese, the name Wukong Clan. Wukong is of course Sporp's last name, but she laughs this off as a mere coincidence instead of stopping to think that this might be why she woke up in the spirit world to begin with. We never do discover why this is though, if it's a coincidence, if it's a whatever, so I guess that's going to be left up to the sequel. Finally, there's a statue of what looks like a half-spirit, half-human woman, wearing a Victorian dress. Keep this one in mind for later. At Lord Squishy's throne, there are different styles of revolvers, all pointing out at his guests as an intimidation tactic. Drawing guns is hard, guys. Okay, this is the best I could do. He has two more guards stationed with him, and Sporp notes that their armor and weapons reminds her of traditional Zulu warriors. She says this aloud, and the spirits respond, in English of course, that they are Zolo warriors. Then, Lord Squishy waddles down the hallway. He is morbidly obese, and his gut drags along the ground. He assumes his throne and announces his title, Lord Squishy. This causes Sporp to laugh, and she has to come up with an excuse really fast, and her excuse is that humans can't control their laughs. Thankfully for her, Squishy is stupid and he believes this. Sporp asks for a wizard to return her home, and Squishy says that he doesn't give out stuff for free. He says that even the Fitsune, who are considered to be lower life forms by the Sperits, are gracious enough to offer blowjobs in exchange for favors for him. It's been established that spirits don't have genitals, so I don't know why this line is in here. They go on to discuss business over dinner, and a big plot point at this part of the story is that Lord Squishy and the guards that accommodate him to dinner speak to Sporp only in English, so that Ding Ding can't fully understand what's going on. It's implied by his strange manner of speaking that he isn't fluent in English, in the language of English, which makes his lie from earlier about being the only spirit that speaks English just so stupid. He's literally the least competent English speaker in the room. Why Sporp keeps him around at all after this point is anybody's guess, because she should now know that he's a liar. He also becomes fully fluent in English at a later point in the story when he stops speaking in his weird dialect. The problem is that it's the narrator who tells us that he can't speak English well, and he certainly can, so the narrator's just wrong. At dinner, Squishy gives Sporp wine, and she thinks it's poison. She refuses to drink it at first, which makes Lord Squishy angry, so he threatens her. Sporp, unfortunately, then drinks the wine, and it turns out that it is, in fact, poison. It's poison from a flower. The wrong form of the word flower. Spirit spells it F-L-O-U-R, so new typo. And this flower, again, the wrong form of flower, is grown in Lord Squishy's garden. The flower is described as being very venomous, which is probably supposed to say poisonous, unless the flower has teeth. They then wait for 4 minutes for the poison's effect to kick in. The text notes that this is silent anticipation. Can you imagine waiting in silence for 4 minutes while nothing happens and people are just looking around all expectantly? If you've ever done like a 30-second or a minute moment of silence, then you know that those drag on forever. So 4 minutes is just too long. Squishy and his men note that Sporp should be showing symptoms by now, and Sporp then admits that she switched her glass with one of the guards. The guard then starts freaking out, and Sporp's inner monologue tells the audience that she didn't really switch the glass, and that it is the placebo effect that is now making the guard feel ill. So the other guard now attacks her with a spear in vengeance for poisoning his friend. She fights him off. He uses a magic spear, and, of course, the fire at the end of this magic spear burns off Sporp's robe, and so now she has to fight with just her top. Just the sashed top part. The Spirit gets the upper hand and is about to break her arm. He tells her that they're going to break her arms and her legs, and starve her in the dungeon, until a demon comes along so they can sell her as a sex slave. The constant flip-flopping between the adorable spirits who cannot be threatening no matter how they're described, and the gross depictions of torture and rape isn't really done to achieve any sort of effect here for the reader. Like, this is not the main character. He is a bad guy. He is a violent character fighting our protagonist. A bad guy screaming, "I'm gonna rape you," is not good characterization. It is so over the top that it becomes boring. It's like edgy comedy for the sake of it. The fact that he's holding a flaming spear and attacking our protagonist should be enough to characterize him as evil without having to threaten to rape her. Ding Ding pulls out a dagger to help. That's what he stole from Claymore earlier. It's a dagger. But Squishy points a revolver at him and tells him Sporp must prove herself on her own. Sporp then spits red liquid in the guard's eye and he backs off temporarily and he's howling in pain. He thinks to himself, mid-battle, while also in pain, quote, "This human used some sort of power to store the poisoned wine in her body without consuming it. She then spat the poison back into my eyes. Although it now won't kill me, it could make me go blind. This human was planning to do this from the beginning, and now I'm vulnerable to an attack." Or maybe you're vulnerable to your attack because you spent half an hour monologuing in your head about what was happening. This is a trend that's going to continue throughout the entire book. Characters have these anime Dragon Ball Z moments where we pause the battle to get inside of their heads. or the heads of one of the onlookers, and they will either summarize what just happened or explain what is currently happening. Again, it's like watching Dragon Ball Z, but the dialogue is very stilted. Like, does anybody think in their own head the word although? Oh boy, I sure do love when my camera overheats and I have to stop my recording and change all my settings. Like, does anybody actually think in their head the word although? Although, maybe my opponent is actually tricking me by doing this. This definitely takes the reader out of the action, especially if it's put in the wrong place or if it goes on for too long. And 56 words of thinking in the middle of a battle scene is definitely too long. Especially when you could just convey the same information by saying, "Ouch, my eyes are burning." She then spat out the poison. Sporp then says, mid-battle, so she freed herself from having her arm broken off, and she says, "Ki is a power that comes from intense focus. It allows us to perform abnormal feats with our anatomy. That is why I was able to snort the wine up into my sinuses to keep myself from being poisoned. And I was then able to store it there to later spit back at you." That quote was so long that it took me 2 tries to say it, and I had to splice the takes together. Sporp could have explained that after the fight, or a character who's not fighting could have figured it out, like Ding Ding could have realized that that is what was happening, and that actually would then give us more insight into Ding Ding's character. Instead, the battle stops, and Sporp tells her opponent how she defeated him. Also, the book will tend to overuse the word then, and the word then is terrible, especially when you're trying to write action. Then he did this, then he did that, then this happened. It kills the flow and it makes things happen. It makes things take longer for the reader. The point of the inclusion of that word should be to make things faster or flow better, or any word should be to make things faster and flow better. So if you're doing something that actually makes it take longer to read, then that defeats the purpose. The word then can be removed in like 99% of instances, especially again in action-heavy scenes. So Sporp, who regained her footing, and the guard, who is going blind in one eye, charge up their most powerful attacks and strike at once, achieving a double knockout, ending the chapter. Next chapter, Sporp wakes up in Ding Ding's house, with bandages covering her arms. Ding Ding is asleep in a nearby chair. She figures that he patched her up, but the book says on page 65, quote, "She indicated that Ding Ding had been taking care of her." This is almost certainly supposed to say she inferred, so that's a new typo 3 or 4, whatever we're on, I lost count. Sporp has been asleep for 4 days, and now she wants to try to get home again. Ding Ding still wants to sell her to a demon as a slave, but he's warming up to her presence. This is weird given that earlier he was running around the town proud that she gave him a name, and he was willing to protect her from Lord Squishy with his life. He shows her a wanted poster for a giant raven monster called Pluck that's been terrorizing the town, and he says Lord Squishy will offer a reward for killing it. From this point on, Pluck is described as chicken-like, and the title of the book is of course called Hunting a Chicken, so I don't know why it's called Raven-like here, but chicken-like everywhere else in the book. They head to a store to buy supplies, including clothes for Sporp, who's still just wearing her sash. The store owner speaks English, of course, and we find out that Ding Ding had ordered a custom dress to be made for Sporp. The shopkeeper hands it over, and Sporp is dismayed at its style. It shows off a lot of cleavage, and it has a slit from her thigh up to her side. It barely goes down her sides at all. It's as gratuitous as it can get. The book also notes that the dress looks like it came out of the 40s. I honestly cannot say that I can think of anything less 40s-like than this very revealing dress. Maybe a 20s flapper dress would be a better description. Maybe I don't know enough about 40s dress culture. Maybe I'm thinking of the 50s. But this is a very revealing dress. So the store owner and Ding Ding have a conversation in Sperit language, and the store owner is shocked that Sporp is human, because he believes that a mere human could not have defeated a Fitsune, Claymore, and a Zolo warrior. Ding Ding explains that she uses a power called Ki, and the store owner says that as far as he knew, only the Wukong clan can use Ki. This ends the conversation, but obviously the reader should have alarm bells going off in their head that Wukong is Sporp's last name. Sporp then decides to buy more stuff for her journey. She buys magic gloves that can lock things in place. Like if you grabbed a rock, you could lift it up, and then the glove would lift it up and it would be locked to your hand. At least that's how I think it works. She then buys a staff that can extend like really, really far in all directions. It's like Goku's staff in the original Dragon Ball. I feel like I should note here that Dragon Ball is very loosely based on the Chinese myth Journey to the West, where the main character is named Sung Wukong. So this book, Sperits, is taking inspiration from Dragon Ball, which is based on Journey to the West. And of course, Sporp's last name is Wukong. Because Sporp has so much money from killing the Fitsune from earlier, she also buys a lantern, a blanket, and some other stuff, including military MREs. So Sperit, the author, was in, or currently is, in the military. So to him, the acronym MRE for Meal Ready to Eat is probably just part of his everyday vocabulary. I can honestly say that I have never come across that word written in a novel in my entire lifetime of reading books. I've heard the term before, but I never just read on page the phrase MRE, with the expectation that the reader should know that it stands for Meal Ready to Eat. And I'm also not sure why a Chinese girl would know or think in this term. It's the term that a soldier would use. From Sporp's point of view, she wouldn't call it an MRE, she would probably call it a meal kit or something like that. Sporp also has to buy rags to use as tampons. I don't understand the point in going into that much detail if she's also not going to buy things like a comb, or a toothbrush, or toilet paper. The book also takes place over the course of several days, and they never go to the bathroom. I don't think that you have to mention when your character pees in your book, but if you're not going to, then you also probably don't need to make mention of when they're menstruating. Ding Ding begs for candy, and Sporp doesn't want to spend all her money, but Ding Ding guilts her by saying that he housed her and took care of her while she was recovering, and he translated for her, despite the fact that he never actually translated for her because every single Spirit that they've run into has spoke English. In fact, they all speak English better than Ding Ding. On page 76, there is a paragraph break in the middle of a sentence. Ding. Sporp and Ding Ding pack their bags and head off riding Ding Ding's cow. They travel for a while to look for Pluck the bird, when they're suddenly attacked by a monster. The monster spooks the cow, and Ding Ding rides it to safety while Sporp fights the monster. There are 2 typos in a row on page 82. One where the first word of a sentence is not capitalized, and another where the word all doesn't have an apostrophe, so it's spelled ill. Sporp is fighting the monster, and she gets underneath its stomach. The text describes that she finds a soft patch of skin and grabs onto it, which hurts the beast. The book then pretends for half of a paragraph that it is not extremely obvious that these are the beast's testicles. It treats this like some sort of reveal. The book also says that testicles are the weak point... What's the quote? On any male creature. Testicles are the weak point on any male creature, which is explicitly not true, because the Spirits, or at least Ding Ding and Squishy and several other spirits that we've met, are gendered as male, but are explicitly said not to have genitalia, meaning that there are, in this scene in this book, in this very scene, there are male characters to which their testicles are not their weak spots because they don't have any. And then on page... Oh, I cannot pull back. I actually just flipped to page 84. Oh my god. On page 84, there's not a space between 2 words, so... Sporp goes in search of Ding Ding, but can't find him, and soon comes across the darkness. Despite Sporp having spent a week here so far, the book has yet to describe how nighttime works. Does the tower light dim as the day goes on to create light, or is it eternally day? This gets explained later, but it definitely should have come up already. So Sporp gets to the barrier of darkness and is apprehensive to go in. Then, a baby Spirit approaches her from behind. This Spirit is tiny, about 2 feet tall, and he has fangs. He's also black. Sporp basically notes that this Spirit is probably a different species, but she still calls it a baby, despite having no reason to. Logically, if it is a different Spirit race, it's possible that all Spirits of this race are shorter than Ding Ding. So there's no reason to assume it's a baby. Like, a fully grown Corgi is not a baby because it's smaller than a Golden Retriever. Once again, this kind of illogic makes Sporp seem dumb, but because the text does tell us it's a baby, we can just keep calling it a baby. Sporp asks the Black Spirit if he's seen Ding Ding, and the Black Spirit nods. Based on things like nodding and thumbs up, plus like all the mentions of 40s attire, it's obvious that the Spirit culture is very influenced by the modern Western world. So this baby Black Spirit was described as speaking like a toddler. And again, he can of course speak English. But when Sporp asks him about Ding Ding, he says, quote, "I saw the heretic of the state spying on our units. We have chased him off, but he still lurks around. If you see anyone who's trying to exchange their goods for capital gain, please report it to my papa." Because clearly all toddlers would use words like heretic, units, lurks, exchange, goods, capital gain. What would have made this section really funny is if the Spirit spoke in uwu text, but had the same kind of dialogue, like the robot card from the Mother's Day episode of Futurama.
The bourgeois human is a virus on the hard drive of the working robot.
Sporp, who is as oblivious as ever, does not understand this, and only gleams from the conversation that this means Ding Ding is alive and nearby. She does not grasp that he's in trouble, and that there are other black spirits in the area who are probably militarized. It's kind of hard empathizing and rooting with a character who is always 5 steps behind the audience, and that's just what it's like reading Sporp as the main character. The baby black spirit demands that Sporp go with him to meet Papa, his father, and Sporp says that she has to find Ding Ding. So the baby, who has the ability to see through the darkness, says that he'll help her as long as she comes along with him once they're done. Sporp names him Chomp because of his teeth, and the two start their journey. After about 5 seconds of talking, it becomes clear that Chomp lives in some sort of communist cult where there are no individuals and the collective is all that matters. Sporp tries to explain the benefits of individualism, and so she fashions a cape for Chomp so that he can learn to be a hero and earn his own glory. Very quickly, they come across Ding Ding, who has made a campfire, and he brandishes a knife at Chomp. He explains to Sporp that the shadow spirits have been slaughtering and waging war against other spirits for longer than anyone can remember. Their leader, Golden Star, used dark magic and advanced military might to crush other spirits. It was the shadow spirits that destroyed Ding Ding in Claymore's village and killed everyone that they knew. Sporp goes from being angry that Ding Ding is racist toward Chomp to being accepting and compassionate that he's just traumatized by his past. This change of attitude takes about 4 seconds. Also, his distrust of Chomp is still racism, even if he has a good reason. Sporp then convinces Ding Ding that they should let Chomp help them, because it could be beneficial, and Ding Ding says that he still doesn't trust Chomp. Then there's a paragraph that switches to the present tense for some reason, talking about how much Ding Ding has grown as a person. Then Ding Ding reminds himself that he needs Sporp alive so that she can kill Pluck the chicken, and that he then will sell her into slavery. Earlier in the chapter, the narrator called them friends, and a paragraph ago, the narrator said that Ding Ding had grown. Now, Ding Ding is thinking to himself that this is a ruse. Basically, the book is telling us that the narrator is wrong, or that Ding Ding is in serious denial. If the narrator is wrong, then that's really bad writing, because that's not how third-person omniscient narration works. If Ding Ding is just in denial, then the tension of his changing his ways by the end of his story arc is lost, because the narrator already told us that he was a good guy. So this needs a serious rewrite right here. The gang stop and eat some of their rations, and as Sporp is talking, Ding Ding hears something approaching them in the darkness. Chomp, who can see in the dark, looks out and sees that they are being attacked by cooties. Cooties are small, frog-like creatures with purple skin and giant teeth and jaws that can unhinge. A pack of them eat their cow, and Sporp starts fighting them. Ding Ding explains that they are made of 99% water, so Sporp can just punch through them and they kind of like they pop like a balloon, like a water balloon. Ding Ding and Chomp watch as Sporp slaughters them all. This fight lasts for 9 pages. Sporp has to use her blood bullet attack to finish them off, and after she does, she feels drained. Then, another monster comes out of the darkness. It's a mutated cootie, and is much larger. It grabs Ding Ding and tries to eat him. The text will call this monster an it and a he interchangeably, and so I'm going to interpret that as the monster continually switching genders every couple of seconds, because that's what the book is telling me. So the giant cootie, known as Big Boy, is apparently an experiment of Golden Star's gone wrong. Just as the monster is about to eat Ding Ding and Sporp, a sword comes out of nowhere and hits it. The sword, of course, belongs to Claymore, and he is here to kill Big Boy. So then Claymore takes the sword and he fights Big Boy for a while, until he gets overwhelmed, and when all seems lost, Ding Ding stabs the beast in its eye, and the beast drops everyone. Sporp slams her magic staff into the beast's face, and the staff shatters. Big Boy screams, "No!" which means that it's capable of speech, which is moderately confusing. And then it starts mutating, its back tears open, and additional limbs and eyes grow out of it at random. Mouths start opening all over its body, and it starts puffing out darkness. Chomp, who's the only one who can see in the darkness, grabs the crystal that had powered Sporp's staff. Remember, Sporp's staff was able to grow in both directions, so Chomp takes it and he embeds it in his own forehead. and Chomp uses this power to grow to a size larger than Big Boy, and then he crushes him like a bug. He holds the monster up, and Claymore impales it with his sword. The monster screams in agony, and then crumbles into a giant heap of crystals. Then, the darkness that plagued the land dissipates, and they can suddenly see in all directions. They can even make out the village Sporp first found at the beginning of her journey nearby. The Borp calls the crystals that Big Boy drops, quote, a great bounty for the party, which reinforces the very cool concept that killing the monsters of this world kind of works like a video game. Claymore is ecstatic that they killed the monster, because it means that Golden Star is vulnerable, and his forces of evil can be defeated. Claymore and Ding Ding finally make amends fully and become full-fledged friends again, and they agree to help people move into their old town, which is now habitable again. Chomp shrinks down to his normal size, and the group vows to do their best to right wrongs and become heroes of the world. Thus ends Chapter 7. So interestingly, this is actually the exact center of the book. Big Boy was almost kind of like a mini-boss, and by defeating him, they've now gathered together their entire venturing party. Ding Ding takes Sporp to his old home in the abandoned village, and he retrieves a suit of armor from a secret closet in his room. He shows her an old photograph of a female Sperit. This is the half-human, half-spirit kind of Sperit, the one that we saw the statue of in Lord Squishy's mansion. He says that she was his princess, and he vows to find her one day, implying that she survived the Shadow Spirit attack on their village. Sporp assures him that he will find her, and the two return to the party. Claymore is surprised, exclaiming, quote, holy sh**. But there's an E in the word holy, it's spelled wrong. On page 117, Sporp speaks to Ding Ding casually in Chinese, and he answers, meaning that Ding Ding speaks Chinese. It's possible that he's been speaking Chinese this whole time and that the book never specified, but the Sperits are described as speaking in British accents, which to me at least implies that they were speaking English. So either it's an inconsistency, or Ding Ding speaks English and Chinese. Claymore tells Sporp that years in their world are 100 days, meaning that they're shorter than on Earth. It's still unclear as to how Sperits know anything about Earth and humans. They've been shown to be a very basic people, and I doubt that they'd have much knowledge of world hopping. It's kind of implied that humans have randomly turned up in their world before, like Sporp did, so they might know a little bit about humans, but it's unclear why Claymore, who is a relatively young Sperit, who is more of a warrior than a scholar, would know that Earth years are 365 days. In this instance, I'm not pointing this out as a criticism of the book. Not everything I say is unclear as a criticism. It's more of a, I wonder how they know that, I can't wait to find out, except we do not learn that information in this book. They also eat meat for dinner. Sporp is told that it's cootie meat. So again, I guess that there's some rule about which monsters become gems and which ones become meat, but it's not explained. And at the same time, the cooties were described as being 99% water, so it's unclear how much meat could really be in their innards. After removing their bones and organs, I don't know how much of that would really be edible. Wouldn't be very filling. They go to bed for the night, and Sporp, who again has been here for like a week, finally asks about the ball of light in the distance and how it works. As night approaches, the ball seems to be closing as if it were an eye, with its lid shutting around it. Ding Ding explains that it is the Sun Tree, and it holds their world together. They chit-chat for a while and ask Chomp about his clan of Sperits. In this conversation, we find out that he knows English because he needs it to spy on the Erikins. The Erikins are the more humanoid Sperits, so now we know that they can also speak English. This clears up how random Sperits around town know English, but it makes it all the more confusing on how Ding Ding knows Chinese. Chomp also says that he belongs to the 420 Dank Battalion of the 69th Attack Company, and that they are trying to bring peace to the land in the name of the evil Dark Lord. So this isn't lampshaded or anything. Sporp does not question the 420, the Dank, or the 69. She just accepts that this is the reality that she's in. The book in general either needs to have more of this kind of humor, or way less of this kind of humor, because like in the paragraph right before, they're talking about 420 Dank Battalion, Claymore is talking about how his village was slaughtered and children died. Also, these Sperits are described as being 4'2", and that is the internet's third favorite number, so they worked all of the memes into there. Obviously, there's ways to create humor by lampshading this kind of thing, but Sporp seemingly doesn't recognize that there's anything weird about these numbers being evoked, and she absolutely would and that is a problem. Claymore gets Chomp to write down the coordinates of his unit's camp, and plans to give the info to Lord Squishy so they can prepare a sneak attack. He thinks to himself that he's glad he's on this journey, because it allowed him to milk information out of Chomp. He thinks that when their quest is over, he'll kill Chomp and make it look like an accident. So that's the kind of thing that at this point you'd be expecting Ding Ding to think. Claymore hasn't really been characterized like that yet, and it makes it seem like the entire story is very jaded. When even the hero is a-okay with slaughtering a child and lying to his friends, there can't really be a good guy. Like in that one sentence, I just stopped trusting Claymore as a character, and I stopped liking him. With Ding Ding still wanting to sell Sporp into slavery, and Sporp herself being an idiot, that makes Chomp the only likable character left. He's also a child and has a long arc ahead of him of learning to grow and be a hero and learn individualism, which makes him the most compelling character. I don't think that was the author's intention, but it's what ends up happening. Characters need to have flaws to be interesting and dynamic, but child killing and sex trafficking aren't really flaws. They're huge acts of evil, and losing interesting characters is a surefire way to get someone to lose interest in finishing the book. Obviously, Claymore wanting to kill Chomp is a necessary setup for him eventually growing to like Chomp, but instead of him just thinking, when no one's looking, I'll kill him, you can at least, feel bad about it. In a couple of pages, he revisits this thought, and he does feel bad about wanting to kill him, but I don't understand why that thought isn't here. We don't see Claymore having any internal struggle here about killing a child. Claymore asks Sporp for her backstory, and she starts expositing in a very unnatural way about her childhood. She says, one day, she found a magical staff, and she gave it to her father. After that, her father started drinking a lot, and snorting white powder that made him angry. It's implied that this is cocaine, but with all of the magical stuff in the book, who knows? Sporp continues, and says that her father used the magic staff on her to make her nose grow. The kids made fun of her, and then, one day, when she was 5, her father attacked her. A knight came and saved her, and she ran away to Fairy World to become its queen. One day, a dragon attacked, and the knight who saved her a long time ago came back and saved her again, which inspired her to become a hero, so she moved to China and became a monk. This story is obviously fake, but you can glean that Sporp's father was abusive, and then he attacked her, and she got a lump on her nose, and then the cops came and took her away and saved her, and then I guess her new family was abusive too, so she moved to China because she wants to defend herself. That's what I got from that story. Where's the deep Sperits lore? Someone needs to get Matt Pat on Sperits hunting a chicken. I'm also not entirely sure what the dragon is supposed to be symbolic of. Chomp loves the story, but Claymore and Ding Ding don't buy it. Because, obviously. The word princess also triggers Ding Ding, and Claymore realizes why. He becomes suspicious, and he asks Ding Ding where he ran off to on the day of the invasion where their entire town was slaughtered. He asks Ding Ding why he speaks to Sporp in the manner that he does, which is to always ask a question and then answer it with a yes or a no. All of his English dialogue so far has been like his first sentence, which was, "Am I not a monster? Yes. Am I friendly? Yes." It's implied that this is how servants speak, and so Claymore asks if Ding Ding now worships Sporp like his princess. It's clear that he definitely is doing this, seeing as he gave her a dress that his own princess would have worn. It doesn't say if they're talking in Spirit or in English, but I'm going to assume that they're talking in the Spirit language because Sporp does not react to this conversation. Because of these accusations, Ding Ding takes out his dagger, the one that he stole from Claymore. The dagger is actually magical and has the ability to make things that it touches weightless. Sporp steps between him and Claymore, who had already drawn his own sword. They swing their blades and Sporp blocks their blows with her arms. The shock of being cut knocks her unconscious, and Claymore uses a healing crystal on her. This is the last healing crystal that he has, and he thinks to himself happily that now he has an excuse to not save Chomp if the child gets injured. These healing crystals, I guess, work like a healing item in a video game or like a sensu bean in Dragon Ball where you just magically get better. I guess Ding Ding didn't have any of these, or else Sporp wouldn't have been in a coma for 4 days. Maybe they're rare, I don't know. The next morning, Claymore feels guilty for wanting to kill Chomp. He asks himself if Ding Ding would agree that it was for the best. Now this would be an interesting moment of character study if Claymore thinks to himself that Ding Ding, the criminal coward, might act more virtuous than himself, the valiant knight, and that this would cause him to reassess his code of ethics and his life decisions. But that doesn't happen. He just worries that Ding Ding will be mad at him and kill him with his crab claw power. They set off and they walk for a while. Chomp said that his papa, the leader of the 420 battalion, uses Pluck the Chicken to attack villages, so they're gonna go in the direction of his camp. Claymore and Ding Ding have a whispered conversation about killing Chomp if they have to. Ding Ding agrees that he wants vengeance against the Shadow Spirits, but he also can't help but think that Chomp makes Sporp happy, and he doesn't want to upset Sporp. They arrive in a cold valley of snow, and the journey becomes arduous. Eventually, they crest a hill, and it suddenly becomes warm. Sporp asks why the weather changes so quickly, and Chomp explains that the 420th Battalion have a magical spirit called a Spoogler, who can use magic to keep their surroundings warm. So that's how they know that they're getting close. Then, Chomp is attacked out of nowhere by a cloaked figure. He uses his Grow Larger crystal to stop her, and once defeated, she reveals herself to be Onigiri, Lieutenant of the 420th. She's half human, half fox, basically a human with backwards bending legs and fox ears. She's mad that they killed Big Boy, and is pissed that they have Chomp with them. Then, a Spirit comes out of nowhere, and tells her not to fight them. He introduces himself as Roto, Chomp's older brother, and he tells them that Chomp will be executed for treason. Sporp steps between the two spirits, and Roto tells her to stand aside, calling her by her name. Sporp asks how he knows her name, and he says that spies have been following her since she arrived in their world, trying to figure out how a human was able to get there. He says humans have used magic before to get to their world, but it's never been understood how, and the Shadow Spirits want to learn how, so that they can invade Earth. He says Sporp will make a good shadow human, and Sporp realizes that the Shadow Spirits aren't really their own race. They're just normal spirits that have been infected with some kind of evil. Roto shames Chomp by spinning him really fast, removing his corruption from him, so now he's a normal white spirit. Then, Spoogler shows up. He is huge, he's 5.5 feet tall, and he has gems embedded in his skin. Claymore explains that Spooglers are spirits who go insane from too much magic use, but they're very powerful. Spoogler speaks nonsense words that Roto is capable of understanding but make no sense to anybody else. Spoogler apparently suggested that they battle in small groups. Roto will take Sporp, Spoogler will take Claymore and Chomp, and Onigiri will take Ding Ding. Without any other choice in the matter, the heroes agree. They enter a cave with 3 splitting tunnels, and they walk away in their groups to fight. The next 3 chapters each detail a fight between the 3 groups, starting with Ding Ding versus Onigiri the Fitsune. They walk together toward their spot in the cave, and Ding Ding harasses her the whole time about the Great Betrayal, when Fitsune turned on each other, and some joined the Shadow Army. Onigiri is the equivalent of a teenager, and Ding Ding pities her. He tells her he will not fight her. This makes her mad, and she reminds Ding Ding that he threatened to kill Chomp if Chomp hurt Sporp. It's kind of hypocritical to kill a child, but not a teenager. Ding Ding says that he would never have hurt the child, and also he thinks to himself that he would never do such a thing. This means that Ding Ding is less prone to child murder than the hero Claymore. Onigiri says that adults only lie and they don't listen, which is why she joined the Shadow Army, because they tell the truth and they do listen. Ding Ding says that the Shadow Army kill entire villages and sell Fitsune into slavery. Onigiri becomes enraged because her conditioning is being questioned, so she charges at Ding Ding. Ding Ding lets her chase him around, trying to tire her out. The book then has my favorite line in any piece of fiction ever of all time. Ding Ding turned heel to run from the fox, forcing her to chase him like a wolf. Then Ding Ding uses his magical vambrace to shoot wires out at Onigiri, and it trips her like an AT-AT. Ding Ding basically ties her to a chandelier by his tow cable things, and then he hoists her up to the ceiling. He declares that he's won, and he refuses to take her life, but she's still angry and wants to fight. She uses her ultimate ability, and her tail morphs into a bird. She is a soul guardian, so she can do that. She flies free, and Ding Ding shoots her again with the cable, this time wrapping the cable around her neck. She falls unconscious after being strangled, and Ding Ding quickly unties the wire and takes time tending to her wounds, patching them up with band-aids. He even leaves a spare one of Sporp's robes for her to wear to cover herself up more. The book explains that Ding Ding understands sexuality, despite Sperits being asexual because of his travels. This is something that should definitely have been explained earlier so that we understood his actions more. Onigiri wakes up, and thanks Ding Ding and tells him that she joined the Shadow Army because they showed her compassion, and then starts explaining how they gaslighted her. But as she realizes that she was lied to, her conditioning breaks in again. She goes berserk, and her tail becomes a dragon, and she caves in the tunnel entrance, so they can't flee until the battle is over. Ding Ding survives by using his Crab Claw ability, which shocks Onigiri. On page 155, there's no space between what Onigiri shouted in disbelief. So then Ding Ding traps Onigiri and cuts off her tail. This makes her relatively powerless and she collapses. She hands Ding Ding a piece of paper. It's a recruitment ad that tells demons to join the Shadow Army if they want to rape yokai, and she probably carries it around with her to remind herself that without the Shadow Army, she is worthless. Ding Ding promises to come back for her once he's helped the other battles, and he begins to pound the rocks away from the opening of the cave. Meanwhile, Claymore and Chomp begin the battle with the Spoogler, who is extremely magically powerful. He blasts magical energy at the other two Sperits, and his power seems insurmountable. He tears the gem out of Chomp's head, and Chomp starts to bleed out. Claymore is touched by Chomp's sacrifice, and he decides to not let him die by using his last healing crystal on him. He of course already used his last healing crystal on Sporp earlier, so either I missed something, and if I do then I apologize, or Claymore had two last crystals. The two Sperits flank the Spoogler, and Claymore manages to impale Spoogler with his sword, stabbing him through the heart. This doesn't even faze Spoogler, who blasts lightning at Claymore, cooking him from inside his armor. Near death, he tells Chomp that he did great. Chomp becomes enraged and transforms into what he calls a cosmic Sperit, with claws and glowing eyes. He tears Spoogler to shreds, spilling his innards and stuff onto the floor, but Spoogler hits Chomp and he flies across the room, just as Ding Ding enters. Ding Ding tries to heal Claymore with his own healing crystals, but Claymore tells him to save them for Chomp if needed. He dies in Ding Ding's arms, crumbling into sapphires. Enraged, Ding Ding takes Claymore's sword and lunges at Spoogler, lopping off his arm. The book specifies that Ding Ding does so without a care for Chomp, who is in the way of the swing. Ding Ding picks up the arm, and all the magical gems are now his to control. The Spoogler starts to gain his sanity back with fewer gems embedded in his body. With sanity finally returned to him, the Spoogler lives for another 5 seconds before Ding Ding turns on him and blasts him with his own magical arm. This drains life energy out of Ding Ding, who asks Chomp for help getting up. But Cosmic Chomp has become consumed by the dark power that he harnessed, so he attacks Ding Ding. Ding Ding tries to talk sense to him and hold him back, but he can only do so for so long. Then, Chomp's father, Papa, enters the room, surrounded by guards. The evil guards are described as ghost-like, and Papa puts his hand on Chomp's shoulder and tells him that he's done well to shape off Sporp and Claymore's lies. He removes Chomp's cape and whisks him away, telling his soldiers to finish off Ding Ding. Cut to Sporp and Roto about to fight. Roto talks about how great Papa is, and Sporp asks him why he's so great. Roto says that Papa killed the Great Titan, and Sporp asks him who the Great Titan is. Roto laughs about how little Sporp knows about their world, and then mocks her, asking if she even knows how she got there. She says that she doesn't, and he smiles evilly and tells her that she's dead, that this is the afterlife, and that it's not heaven. Yes, that is in fact how the book explains it. Sporp is then able to remember the memories that she's been repressing. She and other monks had been lined up, and a man had flipped a coin to decide their fate. She had been shot in the head, and she had been denying it the whole time. Roto then punches Sporp in the chest, stopping her heart in a single punch, and Sporp collapses. Roto starts doing an evil villain monologue, but Sporp then does the most metal thing ever and breaks her own rib cage and uses her broken rib to cut her chest open, and she reaches in and she squeezes her heart with her hand to get it pumping again. Then she grabs a torch from the wall and cauterizes her own wound. And she gives off an epic one-liner. But this victory does not last long, as Roto pounds Sporp to a pulp once again, shattering her bones. He gloats that Spoogler is able to see possible futures, and he determined that there was a 99% chance that Onigiri would die, and were that to come to pass, then Sporp would join him and the dark side. He offers Sporp a chance to join him, but a voice calls out to them and says that Ding Ding spared Onigiri's life, meaning that the prediction was wrong. Ding Ding enters and he stabs Roto. Roto responds by absorbing Sporp into himself with a flesh-conjoining key technique, meaning that Ding Ding cannot kill him without also killing Sporp. Ding Ding is very upset that Sporp is about to die. He cries out in anger that he was unable to save one girl, which is obviously his deepest regret, his inability to save his princess from his hometown. He's been protecting Sporp to try to redeem himself, even though on the surface he's been thinking he was going to sell her into slavery. He says he regrets not being able to save Claymore and Chomp, and that he just wants to do what's right. Then Onigiri appears in the cave entrance, watching. Sporp tells Ding Ding that he is a good guy. He spared Onigiri. He can do what needs to be done. Ding Ding gets it together and he stabs Roto. He uses the magic of his dagger, which, if you remember, makes things weightless. And he uses it to make Roto's blood weightless, which allows Sporp to pull herself free, as his fleshy limbs are no match for her strength. This all happens on page 180, and there's another typo there. A quotation mark is added mid-sentence, so let's push that dinger up. Free, Sporp uses her blood bullet ability to shoot Roto. Keep in mind she does this by spinning her blood. The combination of the rotation of the bullet and the weightlessness of Roto makes him spin really, really fast, and it literally tears his gelatinous spirit body apart. He dies and turns into crystals, and Ding Ding proudly proclaims that his honor is restored to him, that he is Ding Ding, husband of Princess Petroloid. Sporp faints as the chapter ends. Sporp wakes up in a prison cell. Golden Star, the evil Dark Lord God, speaks to her with a disembodied voice. The world around her then dissolves, and she finds herself getting tackled by demons. They force-feed her a pill that makes her senses go fuzzy. They throw her in a room with a bunch of other captured women. The text goes into some detail about how she is raped over and over by the demons for days on end until she is numb to reality. She knows the drugs are what allow them to get away with hurting her, but the drugs also dull the pain, and so she becomes addicted to them. One day, the spirit of a dragon soul guardian appears to her and tells her it's her destiny to kill all the demons, and that he will give her the ability to do so. Sporp blinks, and suddenly everything around her is in ruins. Clearly, she has used this new power to destroy her captors. Papa walks up to her, offering her a role in his army. Sporp realizes that none of the things that she's been experiencing over the last few weeks was real. She wasn't actually going through any of it. She was reliving Onigiri's past. These were the things that happened to Onigiri that led her to joining up with Papa and Roto and Spoogler. Sporp then wakes up for real in a real jail cell. She easily disposes of her guards, and she and Ding Ding meet up with Onigiri. Onigiri is still injured from her battle with Ding Ding. The three have a conversation about killing Papa. Onigiri mentions again how odd it is that Ding Ding is a soul guardian and can grow a crab claw. She mentions that this is a gift from the crab god Cancer. Onigiri stays behind because she's injured, and Sporp and Ding Ding march into Papa's tent. Papa, who's able to act invisibly in the shadows, slashes Sporp's face and tosses Ding Ding across the room. On page 199, he yells, "Spore!" But I'm not sure if this is a typo and he was supposed to say Sporp, or if it was supposed to indicate that he was cut off mid-word, but in that case it should be Spore with one O, but he says Spore with two O's, so it's confusing either way. And on page 202, a sentence is missing a period. On page 203, there's another typo. It says, "The tail failed about." It's probably supposed to say that the tail flailed about. Papa had tricked the two into falling into a large well. At the bottom of the well is the inside of a gourd, and I'm kind of picturing them being inside of a giant pumpkin. It's basically this big seed of evil that is powering all of the dark magic in the area. It's what allows Golden Star to appear in his disembodied manner and speak to Sporp in her mind. Sporp and Ding Ding give up and are resigned to their fate, but then Sporp gets a feeling of hope and punches her way out of the gourd. They tear the gourd from the ground, and this makes it so Papa can't be invisible anymore. They have dealt a serious blow to dark magic. Papa and Sporp start to fight, and Sporp uses her gloves from the beginning of the story, the ones that lock things into place. She holds Papa into place, and Ding Ding beats him up. But the strain of this battle causes her crystal to shatter. The gloves explode and Papa flies back. Sporp punches him, and he gets embedded in the cave wall, and is pretty much down for the count. He thinks to himself that no human could actually do this much damage, and that Sporp must be a demigod. Right before Sporp and Ding Ding move to kill him, Chomp runs in and says that he doesn't want to have to pick a side, but that he can't let them kill his father. He tries to reason with both sides, and tells Papa that these are the heroes who returned him home. Papa then promptly uses his claw to slice open Chomp's intestines, telling him, "What did I say about heroes?" Chomp dies in Sporp's arms, reduced to gems. Sporp and Ding Ding begin to fight Papa, and Ding Ding unleashes a full fury of his soul guardian powers. He summons not just a claw, but the entire avatar of the crab god Cancer, who pounds Papa to a pulp with 2 claws. Papa escapes the pounding and unleashes dark energy, growing into a deformed monster with rows of pointed teeth and human-like proportions. Sporp tries to punch him into submission so that Ding Ding can finish him off, but Papa bites down on Sporp's hand, almost biting it off.
Was that the bite of 87?
This bite is what Sporp wanted, and she fires the blood that is now trickling down her hand like a bullet, and she blows Papa's brains out at point-blank range. But this doesn't kill Papa. It doesn't do anything to him, his head just regenerates. He claims that the power of Golden Star will keep regenerating him over and over, and that he is invincible. But Sporp tells him that she doesn't believe him, because she does not believe that the power of Golden Star is infinite. This is actually a really cool passage because she's basically acting on the faith that Papa believes in a false god, and she bets everything on her belief. She starts fighting up close with Papa, who cuts her a few more times, but Sporp then reveals that this was on purpose. By channeling her ki energy, she's able to control her blood even when it's outside of her body. She's basically water-bending her own blood, and so she sends it at him like a razor disc, and it goes on the ground and starts chopping him from the feet upwards, constantly tearing him up over and over and over. She then picks up the gas canister that had powered Ding Ding's tow cable vambrace, and she throws it at Papa. And it explodes, it bursts open, it sends embers everywhere, and it lights the tent on fire. Papa catches a blaze, while simultaneously being cut over and over by the rotating disc of blood. He burns to ash as he gets chopped to pieces. A final punch from Sporp ends his life for good. Or so we think. Papa is able to mold a tiny bit of his flesh together into a snake, and he slithers away, off to plot again and return with vengeance. The book describes him as a snake with one eye, and that's slang for penis. That's very subtle symbolism right there. Before he can get very far, he comes across Onigiri, who has a monologue about how much of a monster he is. The book cuts away from them with the implication that she killed him, but we aren't sure. Sporp and Ding Ding then find Pluck the Chicken in a cage deep within the caves. They attempt to kill him, but they accidentally set him free and he runs away. They give chase, and they run into Onigiri, who tells them that Pluck is so fast that he's probably miles away, and that they should give up their hunt. Sporp says that she'll give it up, but only if Onigiri becomes their friend and tags along with them. Ding Ding is upset by Sporp's decision. He doesn't want her to give up on her quest to go home, because that would mean that Claymore and Chomp died for nothing. Sporp tells him that no, they didn't, because her new quest is to defeat Golden Star and bring peace to all the Sperits. So Sporp, who wants to help everyone, Ding Ding, who wants to restore his honor, find his princess, and return to a normal life, and Onigiri, who wants to get revenge on all the demons who live in the land, start off on the next leg of their adventure, and Sperits hunting a chicken ends. So, I really liked all of the parts of this book that I wasn't rolling my eyes at. There are obviously 2 ways to look at a book. There is subjectively and there's objectively. And subjectively, I don't like books that use rape as a means to motivate a female character. I don't like unnecessary use of curse words and gore and nudity unless it adds to the story, which in this book, it doesn't. I don't like the use of memes. I've read raunchy fantasy books. I read the entire Song of Ice and Fire series, and those have like way more explicit sex scenes and child murder in them than this. The difference is that they weren't thrown around casually, and they weren't written like smut. Sporp having her boobs pop out in almost every fight seems more like it's some sort of weird fetish than it does some message about her like getting embarrassed and overcoming this issue in her battle. Part of this is due to the inconsistency in the world building. Like, when the book states that Sperits are asexual and don't understand human anatomy, it makes no sense for Claymore, the Sperit, to then purposefully remove Sporp's top. That makes it seem like it's gratuitous. It's being done for the sake of the audience's sick pleasure instead of because of a character's motivation in world. You could have that same scene happen, those same actions happen if it was explained better, but it's not. But again, those things are just things that I happen to notice because I happen to be more sensitive to those issues because I don't like them. That's more subjective. But I do want to talk about more objective things. So that would be like technical issues in the book, like grammar. Use of imagery, character arcs, things like that. So what I can say is that I, like, honestly, really, really, really love this story. The story. The actual events that happen in the novel are great. I like all of the scenes. This is a very good second or third draft. When you're writing a book, the first draft is always you telling yourself the story. The second draft is then you going back in and making sure that the stuff that you wrote in the beginning now lines up with the end that maybe you didn't have fully formulated when you started. The third draft should then be you going in and adding more things like foreshadowing and fixing grammar and having characterization line up, making it so that two characters don't sound the same in their dialogue, they don't use the same sorts of phrases or linguistic quirks. That would be like the third draft. Around this stage, you also have to start cutting characters and killing your babies. That's what people say in the writing community. But the fourth draft is really when you would go in and you would make every sentence or every paragraph have the correct sort of imagery that you want going for. You want to be able to use the prose to express the feeling of the scene that's happening to the reader, along with the actual actions of what are happening in the scene. And there's no reason to focus on that before the fourth draft, because you might end up cutting that scene or cutting that entire character. So what I'm saying is that this book is somewhere along on its third draft, because there's a lot of grammar issues, and the writing isn't up to par with the actual story. With that said, I don't think there's really any gratuitous scenes in the book, and it was definitely paced in a way that kept me reading. I'll also say that figuring out where to start a book is very, very difficult, and the fact that Sperit started it both like in the middle of the action, because it started with Spork waking up in this world, but also far enough away from the main plot that you had to go through literally half the book until the entire fellowship was formed. I liked both of those things. I think that it took a lot of restraint to do that, but also a lot of confidence. Sperit is a master of a lot of elements of storytelling, and when I say that this book is actually legitimately a draft or two away from being published, I actually mean that. The biggest problems, and these are also the easiest problems to fix, are the technical aspects like the grammar, story contradictions, wow, words, I can't even grammar. Story contradictions, spelling, things like that. I pointed out the typos as I went, but there are definitely other things besides just spelling mistakes that need to be hammered out. So, books are the absolute worst medium for telling an action story. It is almost impossible to properly describe a fight scene using words, because the quicker that you want an action to happen within a fight scene, the more words you have to use to describe it, and that is paradoxical and makes it harder for the reader to picture what's happening. The phrase, "he swung his sword," is faster to the reader than "he swung his sword quickly." The second one literally means that he swung faster, but the first one is read faster, and thus when the reader is interpreting it in their mind, they're going to assume that it was, in fact, faster than a normal sword swipe. This is why most of the time when authors are writing fight scenes, they will focus on things besides the actual step-by-step action. They don't want to write it as if it's as like a stage play. They don't want to write a play where it's just he went left, she went right, he dodged, she swung. Especially since those things are absolutely not interesting, like at all. But unfortunately, that is what Sperit does basically throughout the entire novel. His other problem, I talked about this earlier, is the anime monologue problem that breaks up the pacing of the fights. And I think a way that you could fix that is by using something called a double climax. So a double climax would be, I think it was made famous, or at least the example that I was taught when I was in school, is with the Sherlock Holmes books. So in Sherlock Holmes, the first climax is the action scene where they're chasing the villain down the street, and there's they're on horseback and they're shooting or whatever, and then they finally catch him. And then the second climax is when Sherlock sits down with Watson and explains the entire mystery to him and how he found out who the culprit was. So you have the first climax, which is tension and excitement and violence, and then the second climax is the more intellectual one where you find out how we got to this ending. So with a fight, like the kind that happened in this book, you could have the first climax, which would be Spork drinks the wine, and then she she doesn't get poisoned for whatever reason, and then she spits it out, but you don't know how she did that, and then the eyes of the opponent start burning, and they fight, and there's fire, and then they knock each other out. And then the second climax might be after Sporp wakes up, she drowsily explains to Ding Ding that she was able to inhale it up into her sinuses and use her key abilities to shoot it. So you get to have two separate climaxes that are both equally exciting for different reasons, and the pacing of the actual fight scene is not killed, which it definitely is in this story. Another rookie mistake, although there are ways around it, and many authors will disagree with this, but a definite hard thing for the reader to come to terms with is characters whose names all start with the same couple of letters. In the beginning of the book, when it was just calling Ding Ding Sperit, because he didn't have his name yet, and you'd be reading, and it would say, Sporp did this, and then Sperit did that. And obviously both of those characters, their names have about the same number of letters in them, and those first letters are S and P. And so it was hard for me to always know exactly who was talking before I read, like, the entire word. Usually when people are reading books, they'll kind of skim over names if they can just tell who it is from the first couple letters. So having Sporp and Sperit and Squishy all together in those first couple chapters was very difficult. Grammar-wise, there was a lot of instances of it jumping between past and present tense. That's just something that you can just go in and fix really easily. A less easy habit to break are filler words. I already talked about how the word then is a filler word when describing action, but the worst filler word, the biggest culprit, is the word that. For example, if you have the sentence, it was the tallest tree that he had ever seen. The sentence, it was the tallest tree he had ever seen, conveys the exact same information, because the word that is a filler word. When we're speaking, we'll use filler words like the word that, because we want our speech and our brain to be able to keep up with each other. But in writing in a novel, you wouldn't do that. You don't need the word that. It can be cut out in 99% of all cases. Spurt, the author, claimed on Twitter that he paid professionals $1,000 to edit this book, and they probably were not very good, given that all of these mistakes are still in here. He did say that he ended up getting his money back, so that's at least a happy ending to that story. It's also not intuitive, but one of the things that you should focus on when you're writing is taking out adverbs wherever possible. Adverbs are words that end in ly, generally. And they are the worst. There's almost always a better way of phrasing something than using an adverb. And using lots of adverbs is generally how you have something sounding like fanfiction, because fanfiction writers almost all suck and they use a lot of adverbs. Real editors know to remove them, but you will still find them in a lot of published works. Trust me, this is a very hard habit to get out of because it just makes writing harder. You have to actually think about what you want to say instead of just writing like, he ate quickly. You'd have to come up with other words to convey to the reader that the person is eating quickly. So like, okay, if you're using an adverb, you could say, he ate ravenously. And in your mind, that might conjure a picture of him eating ravenously. But it is always better, 100% of the time, it is better, instead of saying, he ate ravenously, to say, he didn't even bother to use a fork, or he was throwing crumbs everywhere as he ate, or there were bits of bread still stuck to his teeth, right? Those are better ways of describing the scene than just the word ravenously. Because ravenously implies all of those things, and all of those things literally mean ravenously, but you're actually describing what's happening instead of just saying that he ate ravenously. So again, adverbs, terrible. Get rid of adverbs. Alright, so this is from page 169. This is Sporp talking. Papa, Sporp interrupted. Who the F is Papa? Is that y'all's sugar daddy? She said rhetorically to antagonize Rodo. So this is just restating the exact same information twice. By the words she's saying, we know that she's speaking rhetorically, and we know that her intention is to antagonize Rodo. We don't need that entire ending of the sentence. We don't need it spelled out for us when you can tell just by the dialogue, so you can just cut that entire tag off of the sentence. On page 137, it says, protectively, Sporp ran towards the two to aid Chomp. You can't run protectively. Like, I know what he means. I know that she was probably, like, her intentions were to protect them, and so she ran because her intentions were to protect. But the word protectively is modifying the verb run. She is running in a protective manner, which is not a thing. Similarly, there are a lot of cliches that people might use in speech that aren't technically correct in writing. So like on page 88, Chomp's eyes began to widen at her words. So like, did they begin to widen and then just stop? Like they actually never got wide, they just started the process and stopped halfway? I'm pretty sure that that is not what Spurt means, so he should just write, his eyes widened at her words. You don't need to write, his eyes began to widen. It might sound rough, but I would say that 100% of the sentences in this book need to be rewritten. And again, that's not anything that's specific about this book. I think that that's something that needs to happen in all fourth drafts of all books. So now I'm going to try to fix one of the sentences that is on page 33. Claymore smiled cockily at her as his eyebrow began to twitch, still fuming. So currently Claymore is fuming with anger at Ding Ding, but that has not been mentioned in 3 paragraphs, so I would remind the reader of this. The sentence also contains an adverb, which means that the sentence should be rearranged so we can be more descriptive. So what I would say would be something to the effect of, Claymore's eyebrow began to twitch, still fuming with resentment toward Ding Ding, but he masked his derangement with a cocky smile. Even though it's longer and some people might take issue with that, I think that that sentence is literally better in every possible aspect than the original. So that kind of bare-bones change to sentences is what needs to happen to every single sentence in this book. Passive voice also needs to be plagued from the book, so lines like, Claymore's mouth began to curl into a crooked grin is passive, and so it should be changed to, Claymore's mouth curled into a crooked grin. Began to curl changes to curled. Sperit also uses a lot of M dashes in the book, which are very fun punctuation marks that I use a lot because they're cooler than a semicolon. But sometimes instead of an M dash, he uses 2 N dashes next to each other. And that's something that you just kind of have to notice and fix in your Microsoft Word document by yourself. Something else that happens, that actually happens to me because I write using multiple different word processors, is in some fonts, the quotation mark are curved. So on one end of the word, they're curved this way, and then on the other end of the word, they're curved this way. Whereas some other fonts, they're both like equally up and down. And for whatever reason, this book alternates between quotation marks that are curved in each direction and quotation marks that are totally vertical. So he just has to go through and basically make sure that he's using the same font throughout the entire book. Similarly, there are asterisks that denote passages of time, but for some reason they're left adjusted on the page, and for that reason sometimes I completely missed that they were there because I didn't see them. So things like that generally would be centered in the middle of the page. There's also the fact that the book is formatted like a news story, where the paragraphs are not indented, and there's a larger gap between them than between the lines. That's not how novels are formatted, so I don't know why they're formatted like this in here. Also, and I pointed this out earlier, but this is the size of like a coloring book or a magazine and not a normal novel, so and I don't know why that is. There's other things, like on page 88, there's an instance where a paragraph does not break between 2 different characters speaking. That's always important. You're always supposed to start a new paragraph when someone new talks. There's other things, like the word key is sometimes capitalized, like it's a proper noun, and sometimes it's not. In addition to rewriting sentences so that the reader can understand them better, there are just some lazy or perplexing descriptions in the book in general, like saying that Golden Harvest, which is Ding Ding's village, looks like a medieval town. Like, yes, this conjures an image in my mind, but I don't think that everybody has a stock medieval town image in their head, and describing things like what the homes are made of, or what the people are dressed like that would have been much better than just saying medieval. Similarly, Claymore speaks with an English accent from the 1940s, like that is explicitly how it's described, and I had to pause reading to think to myself what that might sound like, and I eventually settled on him speaking like Winston Churchill. But to be honest, like, I personally don't categorize accents by decade, so maybe saying something like, he sounded like a British World War II soldier would have been better. There's a couple other single, like, one-off writing quirks, like when Sporp is riding Ding Ding's cow, she says that she's used to riding horses, and that the cow felt thicker than a horse would. This is kind of silly. The cow does not feel thicker, the cow is thicker. In this instance, you can either describe the cow and say that it is thicker, or you can describe what Sporp is experiencing, which would be something akin to like saying she had to spread her legs wider in an uncomfortable manner to adjust to the thicker animal. And I really should have reworded that sentence, but I'm gonna leave that in. You either need to describe the cow or you need to describe Sporp. Sperit seems to be describing Sporp by means of the cow, which is muddled and doesn't end up actually expressing anything. The reader does not feel the sensation of having a cow between their legs because of this description, and because we already know that cows are fatter than horses, it does not help us picture the scene any better. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there are times when Sperit is too literal. On page 94, I just flipped to page 92 on the first try, that's exciting. On page 94, he says, "The creature's body was a dark purple frog-like texture." I know what he means. He means that its skin was, like that of a frog. It was bumpy. But he wrote that it was a texture. And so now I'm imagining that they're being attacked by very blurry Nintendo 64 ceiling textures, skyboxes. The scary tree wall from Majora's Mask is coming for him. The wrong word is being used in the sentence somewhere. On page 182, outside of the small makeshift jail were two shadows that stood outside with short bronze swords. So it says that they're outside twice, so you just need to cut one of those. Similarly, there's a lot of inconsistencies in the book. I've mentioned a couple of times how the sexuality of the spirits is contradicted a couple times. That's not necessarily like an unfixable thing. You just need to explain it a little better. But slightly more problematically would be that Golden Harvest is described as a town from the Middle Ages, and there's like a manor house and things like that. But then later in the book, it's described as Babylonian. Babylon is from like 2000 BC, and of course the Middle Ages were like 1000 AD, so you literally have a town being described as two different things that were like 3,000 years apart in history. Like, those are not the same. It would be like if I described something as like ancient Roman architecture, and then said that it was like colonial American. It's like, no, those are not the same thing. On page 216, it says that Sport hits Papa with a heavy object, and the text says that it leaves a bruise, but earlier in the book it says that spirits cannot get bruises. So it might sound that I'm being very negative about this book, because the negative section of the video was longer, but I'm not. Every character has a very engrossing arc, and I'm very invested in the world and the characters, and I want to know what happens next, and I really want there to be a sequel to this book, because I want to see what happens to them next in the story. The technical parts are much less important to me than the actual content and the narrative of the story. It's like the graphics in a video game or the acting in a movie. It's secondary to the actual story being told, or in the case of a video game, the actual gameplay of the game. And now I get to talk about my favorite part, and that's because at the very beginning of the video, when I talked about how Sperit used the word seance instead of the word sense, and I didn't count it as a typo, that's because it is not a typo, and Sperit told me that he intentionally changed all uses of the word sensed when Sporp is talking about the world to the word seance, because they are in the afterlife. And obviously seances are talking to spirits in the spirit world. So she's literally talking to spirits in the spirit world. So she is seancing the stuff around her, and that was intentional, and I think that that's hilarious. So there's the question of like why I like the characters beyond their dialogue, because the dialogue's not great, and I've already said that there's a lot of repeated lines and there's very generic structure. The reason that I was invested is because I was interested in the mysteries of the pasts of all of these characters. All of the characters are archetypes, which makes me feel a connection to them automatically, because like I know the warrior archetype, I know the spunky adventurer archetype. But because of the mystery of the world that they live in, I don't know much about them. These people live in this, to use the general phrase, this lived-in world. So even though they're an archetype that I recognize, I don't know who they are. I asked Sperit if it was intentional that all of the main characters in the story mirror the main characters from The Wizard of Oz. Ding Ding is the Tin Man. He is literally on a quest to find his love, his heart. Chomp is trying to find courage. He is the lion. Claymore is literally seeking military intelligence. He is trying to find intelligence, so he's the Scarecrow trying to find a brain. And of course, Sporp is Dorothy trying to find her way home. Spurt didn't answer me. So a story where Dorothy takes agency on her quest and actually ends up burning the villain alive while constantly chopping his legs off instead of just accidentally spilling water on her, that's a cool story, and that's why I like this book. That's the long and short of it. A story where the cowardly lion is torn in half by his father is new, to say the least. Basically, an edgy Wizard of Oz sounds cool. I just wish that there was less demon rape in it. Similarly, Ding Ding's motivations and how they're revealed to us are expertly woven into the story. The spirits are described as being single-minded and hard workers, and at one point Sporp describes them as lizard-like. Ding Ding both fits into this description, but also rises above its negative implications. He is single-mindedly focused on his quest to find his love, but because his quest is to go and save somebody else, he rises above the negative implication of just being a hive worker. Much like the good workers of the town, he has a job and he sticks to it, but that job is scavenging through other towns. But the reason he's doing that is because he's looking for intel on his lost love. And the fact that his motivation is to find his lost love, which leaves him to be a scavenger, and because he's a Sperit, he's a good scavenger because he is single-mindedly focused on his work, he ends up being very world knowledgeable. He knows a lot about the land, more than other Spirits do. So when Sporp comes along and she has to travel with someone who knows the land, he's right there. His character motivation, the description, and again, negative implications of his people, all work in tandem to make him the character that has to appear in the story to aid Sporp. It's literally like the perfect description and background of a fantasy creature that I could possibly think of. Ding Ding is just phenomenal. And then, of course, at the end of the story, he has the epiphany that if he can help Sporp, then that would be kind of the same as being able to make up for the fact that he was not able to help his princess. And that's just so good. Helping others to help yourself. That's the moral. Claymore's story was a little bit harder to parse. He wants to protect his citizens because he is traumatized by the attack on his old village. So he joins the adventuring company. He joins the group to gain intel on Golden Star's invasion plans, and he ends up dying fighting one of their lieutenants. So he did die for his cause, but he also died because he refused to accept medical help because he used that medical help on Chomp earlier. But throughout the book, he has been prejudiced against Chomp because Chomp is a dark Spirit. And obviously at one point he was going so far as to wanting to kill Chomp personally. His turn from wanting to kill Chomp to sacrificing himself to save Chomp is basically completely glossed over. We do not see this change of character. It's also very hard to root for him, because one of the first things he does in the story is want to kill Chomp, and even before then, he's not supposed to be this valorant knight who's going to protect the town. In fact, he's shown that he doesn't actually care about protecting the town, because in his first fight with Sporp, when he finds out that she gave Ding Ding a name, he destroys buildings. He flies through them with his sword and interrupts people's days and shatters windows and doors just trying to fight her, because he cares more about things like tradition and honor than he does actually about the people he's supposed to be protecting. Claymore is not a good knight. So while the pieces are there to have a character who is expected to be a Valorant knight but actually isn't, and how he changes over time and now dies trying to protect someone who belongs to the race of people who originally traumatized him, again, that's a good character arc. The problem is that turn to the good side isn't actually in the story. We don't know why he does that. He doesn't have motivation. Speaking of Chomp, he goes from a brainwashed communist who believes that it's evil to be an individual and to want to earn honor, and he changes into somebody who wants to be a hero very quickly. It makes sense that a child would want to be a hero, but that's mostly because in the real world, children want attention or they want power fantasies. But in a magical setting where he is literally capable of using magical powers and where he is the son of the leader of this evil group, you would assume that he has attention and that he can actually use magical powers, which he does in the story. So I'm not sure where this desire to be a hero comes from. Maybe if it was explained that he felt neglected, maybe that his father neglects him, either because he prefers the older brother, or maybe because they are a sort of communist society. Maybe the fact that he's the leader's son is irrelevant. Maybe he was just tossed in a camp with all the other preschool-age Spirits. And maybe that's why he wants more attention, because he feels like he should be better. He feels like he would thrive better in an individualistic society, but that doesn't happen. That's not explored in the novel at all. Also, they need a wacky animal sidekick like Toto. That would really round out the group. You might say that it's the cow, but the cow gets eaten by frogs, and I don't like that. So I would like Sperit, the author, to go back and try to fix a lot of these technical issues, but at the same time, I really like owning this first edition of the book. 3 years later, and I still have my second copy that is in that gallon Ziploc bag that no human hands have ever touched, and I really like having this. He did at one point pull it down from Amazon to fix a bunch of the grammar, and I think he put it back up. If it is back up, it'll be in the description of this video, and despite all of the mistakes, despite the flaws in this book, obviously, I want you to read it. I left out a lot of the actual explanations of like fight scenes, and I left out a lot of jokes and stuff, so that if you still want to go through here and read it, there's a lot of stuff for you to discover and explore. I basically just gave you the Sparks notes. And obviously I want you to support Sperit because he is a great indie artist. And obviously I'm not sponsored. He didn't pay me to say that. He didn't even know I was going to be this negative about the book. I just think that he deserves some support. The best part about Sperit is his design. I love him so much. Those big stupid frog eyes. Squishy little bodies. I don't think it's a wild prediction to say that possibly within the next 10 years, Sperit will be more popular than Mickey Mouse based solely on his design alone. That's totally something that will happen. Hashtag ding ding for president. When Sperit started doing his book update vlogs 7 years ago, I don't think he knew that he would have legitimate fans who were eagerly awaiting the sequel to his book, and I don't think that he knew that one day they would be discussed as serious literature in a way too long YouTube video. So I guess the real moral of the story is resiliency, and just trying and trying and trying and trying until you succeed, or at least until you do your best. Thank you for watching. This video was made with the support of my backers on Patreon. A link to my Patreon is in the description below, and I also have channel memberships available. I would never ask that anybody who doesn't have disposable income donate to my channel, or any YouTuber really. If you're under 18, if you have student loans, there's no reason for you to give money to people who make videos on YouTube. But I would very much like to shout out those people who do allow these videos to get made. Klaus, Eliza, Halmar, Lauren, Morgan, Nan, Rhiannon, Rosebud, Scott, Sophie, Thomgata, Am Hidden, Haley, Jinx, Jose, Just That Spark, Rolo, Shadowmaster, Tanner McCoolman, and Genie. Thank you for watching. Be sure to be nice to each other in the comments. Consider supporting the creators you admire, and never lose sight of the things that are important to you.